The view from Victor Vance's corner office on the 50th floor was usually intoxicating, a sprawling panorama of the Manhattan skyline, a testament to the empire he'd built. But today, the city lights seemed to mock him, each glittering window a reminder of his impending doom. He sat behind a sleek, obsidian desk, the surface reflecting the grim set of his jaw. Across from him, Max Goldberg, his lawyer, shuffled a thick stack of documents, the crisp rustle of paper sounding like nails on a coffin. The air in the room was thick with unspoken disaster, heavy and suffocating. "Max, level with me." Victor's voice was a low rumble, barely masking the desperate tremor beneath. "Is there anything? Anything at all we can do?" He leaned forward, his expensive Italian suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. Max sighed, the sound echoing the deflation in Victor's own chest. He loosened his tie, a rare sign of discomfort for the usually unflappable attorney. "Victor, my friend, I wish I had better news. Vance Industries, the debt load is astronomical. We've explored every legal avenue. Chapter 11, restructuring, emergency financing. Nothing sticks. The creditors are circling like sharks, and frankly, we're out of time and out of options." Victor slammed his fist onto the polished desk, the sharp crack echoing in the sudden silence. "Restructuring? What about finding new investors? There has to be someone, Max. Someone willing to take a chance. I built this company from nothing. I can't just let it die." His voice rose, tinged with panic. Max shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of pity and professional finality. "We tried, Victor. Believe me, we pitched every angel investor and venture capital firm from here to Silicon Valley. The assets, they just aren't there anymore to secure that kind of capital infusion. The creditors aren't interested in promises. They want their money. Now." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "They're moving to liquidate. It's over." "Damn it! Damn it all!" Victor roared, shoving a stack of financial reports off the desk. Papers scattered across the plush carpet like fallen leaves. The intercom buzzed softly. "Mr. Vance? Are you all right in there?" It was Victoria, his ever-efficient executive assistant, her voice laced with concern. Victor whirled around, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and despair. "No, Victoria, nothing is all right," he snapped, the harshness of his tone surprising even himself. He saw her flinch through the slightly ajar door. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Just close the door, please. Hold all my calls." Victoria nodded silently, her eyes wide, and gently shut the door, leaving the two men enveloped in the oppressive silence once more. Max gathered his papers, his movements precise and deliberate. "Victor, unless you have a miracle up your sleeve, my work here is done for now." He stood, extending a hand. Victor looked at the hand, then into Max's sympathetic eyes. He rose slowly, feeling the weight of years settling on his shoulders, and shook it. "Thanks, Max, for everything, even if the news is grim." Max gave a curt nod. "I meant what I said, Victor. If you somehow find a way, any way, call me, day or night." He hesitated. "Take care of yourself." The click of the door latch closing behind Max sounded deafeningly final. Victor sank back into his leather chair, the skyline blurring through a haze of unshed tears. He pressed the heels of his hands against his temples, trying to quell the frantic thoughts racing through his mind. Where did it all go wrong? How could I have been so blind? He muttered the questions into the empty room, the silence offering no answers, only the crushing weight of failure. After several minutes, a flicker of his old determination returned. He wouldn't go down without a fight. He grabbed his overcoat and briefcase, straightened his tie with defiant precision, and strode towards the door. Victoria looked up as he approached, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Vance, will you be back this afternoon?" she asked softly. "No, Victoria," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I'm not here. For anyone." Victor Vance gunned the engine of his sleek silver Aston Martin, the powerful roar momentarily drowning out the turmoil in his head as he pulled out of the underground garage and into the bustling New York City traffic. Rain had begun to fall, streaking the windshield and blurring the already chaotic cityscape. The wipers swished back and forth in a hypnotic rhythm, mirroring the frantic, repetitive loop of his thoughts. Failure, bankruptcy, ruin. He drove aimlessly, navigating the familiar streets without conscious thought, the towering buildings seeming to press in on him. Midtown, downtown, across the bridge and back. It didn't matter. He was adrift in a sea of concrete and despair. The city's relentless energy, usually a source of inspiration, now felt oppressive, a constant reminder of the dizzying heights from which he was about to fall. He barely noticed the changing traffic lights, the honking horns, the hurried pedestrians dashing through the rain under a sea of umbrellas. Each face seemed to hold a silent judgment. He felt exposed, vulnerable, the king of a crumbling empire about to be dethroned. At a red light near a gritty intersection somewhere on the edge of the garment district, the rain drumming harder on the roof, he found himself staring blankly ahead. Suddenly, a small figure darted between the idling cars, dodging puddles. A kid, maybe 10 or 11, thin and wiry, clutching a dirty bucket in one hand and a worn squeegee in the other. His jacket looked soaked through and offered little protection against the damp chill, his face smudged with grime, but illuminated by a pair of startlingly bright, intelligent eyes that held a spark of street-smart defiance. The boy made a beeline for the luxury car, rapping lightly on the passenger side window with his squeegee handle. Victor ignored him, staring straight ahead, lost in his own misery. The tapping became more insistent. Annoyed, Victor reluctantly pressed the button, lowering the window a few inches. Cold, damp air rushed in. "Hey, mister, clean your windshield? Make it shine!" the kid chirped, his voice surprisingly clear despite the traffic noise and rain. He gestured with the squeegee, his eyes quickly taking in the expensive interior of the car, the leather seats, the man in the tailored suit. Victor reached into his wallet, pulling out the last few bills he had, a 20 and a couple of 5s. He rarely carried much cash. He thrust them towards the boy through the gap. "Here," he mumbled, his voice rough. "Keep the change. Just go." The boy looked at the money, then back at Victor's face, his expression shifting from hopeful hustle to something else, recognition, and a strange sort of pity. "Thanks, mister," he said, taking the bills. "But, I don't think this is going to solve your real problems." Victor frowned, startled out of his stupor. What did this street kid know about his problems? "What are you talking about?" he asked, a flicker of irritation rising through the fog of despair. The boy leaned a little closer, raindrops glistening on his unruly dark hair. "Vance Industries, right? Big trouble." Victor Vance stared at the squeegee kid, dumbfounded. How could this child, washing windshields for spare change on a rainy Manhattan street, possibly know about the catastrophic state of Vance Industries? It wasn't public knowledge yet, not fully. Only his inner circle, his lawyer, and soon the ravenous creditors knew the full extent of the disaster. How do you know my company?" Victor stammered, the question hanging in the damp air between them. The traffic light turned green, and horns started blaring impatiently behind him. The kid ignored them, his bright eyes fixed on Victor's face. "Saw your picture online. Big boss man," the boy said simply, gesturing vaguely towards the towering office buildings downtown. "Your main office is just around the corner, right? Heard things? People talk?" He paused, then dropped the bombshell, his voice suddenly serious, losing the street hustle tone. "Look, Mr. Vance, I think I know how you can save your company." The absurdity of the statement hit Victor like a physical blow. A drenched kid with a bucket thought he held the key to salvaging a multi-million-dollar corporation teetering on the brink of collapse? It was ludicrous. Yet, there was something in the boy's steady gaze, an unexpected confidence, that made Victor hesitate. Desperation gnawed at him. He had nothing left to lose. "What did you say?" Victor asked again, his voice barely a whisper over the din of traffic and the drumming rain. He ignored the increasingly angry honking from the car behind him. "I know how to help," the boy repeated calmly, as if discussing the weather. "You gotta look again at the paperwork. For that big project, the Phoenix Tower deal, something's wrong there, really wrong." Victor's mind raced. The Phoenix Tower project was their last major contract, the one that was supposed to stabilize everything, but had somehow accelerated the downward spiral. He'd pored over those documents, Max had pored over them. What could they have missed? How could you possibly know anything about that? Victor demanded, suspicion mixing with a desperate, illogical flicker of hope. My mom, the boy said. She knows. He glanced nervously back at the line of cars. Look, the light's green, gotta move, but you should call her, Karen White. She used to work for you. The name hit Victor like a forgotten memory surfacing from a murky depth. Karen White. Of course, his former accountant. Brilliant, meticulous. Fired years ago under a cloud of suspicion. Financial irregularities. A scandal he'd been eager to bury quickly. Wait here, Victor commanded, suddenly making a decision. He flipped on his hazard lights, ignoring the enraged shouts from other drivers, and quickly maneuvered the Aston Martin to the curb, parking haphazardly in a loading zone. He beckoned the boy over. Get in. The kid hesitated for a second, clutching his bucket, then opened the passenger door and slid onto the plush leather seat, placing the grimy bucket carefully on the floor mat. Okay, Victor said, turning to face him, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof. Tell me everything. Who are you? And what exactly does your mother know? The boy settled into the luxurious passenger seat, seeming momentarily overwhelmed by the car's interior, but quickly regaining his composure. He looked Victor straight in the eye. My name's Daniel, he said, his voice clear and steady now that they were out of the rain and traffic noise. Daniel White, and my mom, Karen White, she used to be your head accountant. Victor felt a jolt, a mixture of recognition and unease churning in his gut. Karen White. He remembered her vividly now, sharp, dedicated, one of the best minds he'd ever hired. Until the incident, whispers of missing funds, discrepancies in the quarterly reports, a swift, brutal internal investigation led by his then-protégé, Anthony. Karen had protested her innocence vehemently, claiming she'd uncovered something herself, something dangerous, but in the face of Anthony's seemingly damning evidence and the need to avoid a public scandal, Victor had made the swift, cold decision. He'd fired her. No severance, no letter of recommendation, just a box of personal belongings and a security escort out of the building. The memory left a bitter taste in his mouth, a pang of guilt he hadn't allowed himself to feel for years. Karen, your mother? Victor repeated, processing the connection. The squeegee kid was the son of the woman he'd cast out. Yeah, Daniel nodded, his young face set with a fierce loyalty that tugged at something within Victor. She always said you were set up, Mr. Vance, and that she was set up too. Framed. She tried to warn you back then about irregularities. But no one listened, especially not after... He trailed off, but Victor understood. After she was accused. After he had signed off on her termination, trusting Anthony implicitly. She tried to clear her name, Daniel continued, his voice tight with remembered frustration. But they shut her down, took her credentials. No one would hire her as an accountant after that. Victor stared out at the rain-slicked street, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. If Karen had been framed, who had framed her, and why? Could it be connected to the current disaster? To the Phoenix Tower documents Daniel had mentioned? A desperate, fragile tendril of hope began to unfurl within him. What if Daniel was right? What if Karen held the key, not just to her own vindication, but to his salvation? You think she can help me now? Victor asked, the question feeling momentous, heavy with the weight of past wrongs and future possibilities. I know she can, Daniel said with unwavering conviction. She's smart, Mr. Vance. Real smart. She saw something back then, and I bet it's connected to what's happening now. You just gotta give her a chance. Call her. He looked at Victor expectantly. The desperation Victor felt was a powerful motivator. He'd hit rock bottom. What did he have to lose by chasing this ghost from his past? Okay, Daniel, Victor said, pulling out his phone. Give me her number. After jotting it down, Daniel grabbed his bucket. Good luck, Mr. Vance, he said, pushing the door open. I gotta go. Mom worries. He slipped out into the rain and disappeared into the lunchtime crowd as quickly as he'd appeared. Victor watched him go, then stared at the number on his phone. Karen White. He took a deep breath and dialed his office. Victoria, he said when his assistant answered. I need you to do something discreetly. Find me the current contact information for a former employee. Karen White. Yes, that Karen White. Find it, now. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as Victor waited in his parked car, the rain still drumming a relentless beat on the roof. The number Daniel had given him felt like a potential lifeline, yet the thought of actually calling Karen White filled him with a complex mix of dread and fragile hope. He remembered the confrontation in his office years ago, her tearful but defiant insistence on her innocence, his cold, calculated dismissal based on Anthony's neatly presented evidence. He hadn't wanted to believe his trusted protégé could be wrong, or worse, lying. Dismissing Karen had been easier, cleaner. Now the memory felt like a lead weight in his stomach. Had he ruined an innocent woman's life based on a lie? His phone buzzed, displaying a message from Victoria with a phone number and a brief professional note. Current contact for Karen White. It matched the number Daniel gave him. No more excuses. His fingers hovered over the call button, sweat prickling on his palms. He imagined her reaction: anger, bitterness, disbelief. Why should she help the man who had publicly shamed and fired her? He wouldn't blame her if she slammed the phone down, but Daniel's conviction and his own desperation pushed him forward. He took another deep breath and pressed call. The dial tone seemed to stretch into eternity, each ring echoing the frantic thumping of his own heart. He felt like a teenager about to confess to a terrible mistake. Finally, the ringing stopped. Hello? The voice on the other end was cautious, professional, but unmistakably hers. Older, perhaps, tinged with a weariness he didn't remember, but still sharp, intelligent. Victor froze for a second, the reality of the call hitting him. Karen? He began, his voice huskier than intended. It's Victor Vance. Silence. A heavy, loaded silence that stretched for what felt like an hour. He could almost hear her mind working, processing the shock, the audacity of his call. Then a short, sharp laugh, devoid of humor. Victor Vance, she repeated, the name laced with undisguised sarcasm. Well, this is a surprise. Let me guess. You tracked me down to finally apologize? Or perhaps you've uncovered some new evidence to pin on me? The bitterness in her tone stung, but he deserved it. No, Karen, nothing like that, Victor said quickly, forcing himself to sound calm, reasonable. Actually, I need your help. I have some questions about the company, about some financial reports. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. Maybe we could grab a coffee? Talk? He could almost feel her weighing the request, the years of resentment warring with professional curiosity, perhaps. More silence. He was sure she was about to refuse, to tell him exactly where he could shove his coffee invitation. Coffee, you say? Karen finally replied, a cynical edge to her voice. All right, Vance. You've piqued my curiosity. I'll give you that. Tomorrow, noon. There's a diner near the old textile building on 38th, Rosie's Place. You know it? Yes, I know it, Victor confirmed, a wave of relief washing over him, so potent it almost made him dizzy. Thank you, Karen. I'll be there. Don't be late, Vance, she added, her voice hardening again. My time is valuable these days. The line went dead. Victor slowly lowered the phone, his hand trembling slightly. He had the meeting. It was a start, a terrifying, uncertain start. He leaned his forehead against the cool leather of the steering wheel, replaying the conversation, her voice, the years of unspoken history hanging between them. Later that evening, alone in his sprawling, empty penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, a glass of expensive single malt scotch did little to soothe his frayed nerves. The luxurious surroundings felt hollow, meaningless. He kept thinking about Karen, about Daniel washing windshields in the rain, about the choices he'd made. His father's voice echoed in his memory, a stern warning from years ago. Never burn your bridges, Victor. You never know when you'll need to cross back over. He'd burned the bridge with Karen White spectacularly. Now he had to pray she was willing to help him rebuild it, before everything else turned to ash. Rosie's Place was exactly as Victor remembered it from years ago when he'd occasionally met contacts there. A classic New York diner, slightly worn around the edges but clean, bustling, smelling warmly of frying bacon and strong coffee. Stainless steel trim, red vinyl booths, checkered floor. He arrived a good 20 minutes early, nerves jangling, and claimed a booth near the back, facing the door. He needed to see her arrive, prepare himself. He ordered a black coffee he didn't want and nervously tapped his fingers on the Formica tabletop. Right at noon, the bell above the door jingled, and Karen White walked in. Time had been kind to her, yet marked her. She carried herself with a certain guarded poise he hadn't seen before. Dressed in a simple but professional navy blue dress under a practical trench coat, her dark hair pulled back neatly, she scanned the diner, her eyes sharp. When they met his, there was no flicker of warmth, only cool assessment. She walked directly to his booth. Victor scrambled to his feet, suddenly feeling awkward and overly formal. "Karen, thanks for coming." He gestured to the seat opposite him. "Hello, Victor," she replied, her voice even as she slid into the booth, declining his clumsy offer to help with her coat. She didn't offer her hand. An uncomfortable silence settled between them as the waitress approached. Victor ordered another coffee. Karen asked for tea with honey. As soon as the waitress left, Karen folded her hands on the table, her gaze direct and unwavering. "All right, Vance, you wanted to talk. What is so important that you felt the need to dredge up the past?" Her directness unnerved him. He took a shaky sip of his lukewarm coffee. "Look, Karen, first, about what happened back then," he began, but she cut him off. "Let's not waste time on ancient history, unless it's relevant to why you called me out of the blue." He decided bluntness was the only way. "I met your son today, Karen. Daniel." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise momentarily breaking through her composure. "Daniel? Where? What was he doing?" "He was washing windshields at the corner of 39th and 8th, Victor admitted, feeling a fresh wave of guilt. Karen's face tightened, a flash of anger mixed with maternal worry crossing her features. She closed her eyes briefly. "That boy," she murmured, shaking her head. "He knows better than to—" "He does it to help out," she added, a defensive edge creeping into her voice as she looked back at Victor. Things haven't exactly been easy since he'd fired her. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. "He seems like a great kid," Victor offered sincerely. "Smart. He's the reason I called. He said you might know something about irregularities, specifically the Phoenix Tower project finances." Karen leaned back, studying him intently. "So, you finally need my expertise again? After all these years? After you threw me to the wolves?" "I know I handled things badly, Karen. Terribly," Victor said, meeting her gaze. "I should have listened. I should have investigated further. I trusted the wrong people." Karen let out a short, bitter laugh. "You trusted Anthony, you mean?" Victor flinched at the name. "Yes." "Your golden boy," Karen continued, her voice low but vibrating with suppressed fury. "The one you promoted right after I was kicked to the curb. Let me tell you what I tried to tell you back then, Victor. Anthony wasn't just mistaken. He framed me, deliberately. He cooked the books, created a false trail that led straight to my login, my accounts. Because I was getting too close, I found discrepancies, transfers to shell corporations, money disappearing." Victor stared at her, stunned into silence. Anthony? His right-hand man? His friend? Embezzling? Framing Karen to cover his tracks? It seemed unthinkable, yet it explained so much. The current financial black hole, the Phoenix Tower numbers that never added up. "He stole from the company?" Victor asked, his voice hoarse. "Millions," Karen confirmed flatly. "Over years, I suspect. I caught the edge of it, reported my concerns discreetly, and suddenly, I was the villain. He used the investigation to bury his own crimes and get rid of the one person who could expose him. And you let him?" The accusation hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Victor felt sick. "Karen," he said finally, his voice thick with regret and dawning horror. "If what you're saying is true, I need your help to prove it. Vance Industries is about to go under. This might be the only way to save it, to expose him." Karen looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. He saw the years of hurt, the struggle, the resentment warring within her. Then a flicker of the fierce determination he remembered. "All right, Vance, she said slowly, her voice firm. I'll help you. Not for you, not for Vance Industries. For me, for my son, to clear my name finally, and to make Anthony pay for what he did. She leaned forward. Get me access to everything. Current financials, server logs, project accounts for Phoenix Tower, Anthony's internal correspondence, everything, and I mean everything. Victor nodded, a surge of adrenaline replacing the dread. You'll have it. Leaving Rosie's diner, Victor Vance felt like he'd just stepped off the world's most terrifying roller coaster. Karen White's revelations about Anthony had hit him with the force of a physical blow. His trusted protege, his friend, the man he'd relied on for years, was potentially a cunning thief who had not only framed an innocent woman, but might be the architect of his company's entire downfall. The betrayal felt deep, personal, and sickening. But beneath the shock and anger, a fierce resolve was hardening. Karen's agreement to help was a lifeline, but he knew he couldn't rely on her alone. He needed irrefutable proof, evidence that would stand up in court and, more importantly, expose Anthony completely. There was only one person he trusted for that kind of work. He pulled over on a side street, the Aston Martin's engine humming quietly, and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name: Al Thompson. Al was an old friend, a former NYPD detective who'd gone private years ago. Sharp, tenacious, and discreet, Al specialized in the kind of sensitive corporate investigations that required navigating murky waters. Victor hadn't needed his services in years, but he knew Al was the man for this job. He dialed the number. Thompson Investigations, a gruff voice answered on the second ring. Al, it's Victor Vance, Victor said, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a slight pause, then Al's voice warmed. Vic, long time no hear, buddy. What's up? Calling for stock tips or you finally need a real detective? Victor managed a weak chuckle. Definitely the latter, Al. I'm in a situation. A bad one. I need your help. Urgently. Sounds serious, Al replied, his tone shifting instantly to professional concern. My office, 30 minutes. I'm downtown. On my way, Victor said, already putting the car in gear. Al Thompson's office was tucked away in a nondescript building near City Hall, a stark contrast to Victor's gleaming corporate tower. The space was cluttered but functional, filing cabinets overflowing, maps pinned to corkboards, the scent of stale coffee hanging in the air. Al greeted him with a firm handshake and a searching look. He hadn't changed much, still stocky, sharp-eyed, with a cynical but ultimately reassuring demeanor. All right, Vic, Al said, gesturing him to a worn leather chair opposite his desk after pouring them both mugs of strong black coffee. Spill it. What kind of mess have you gotten yourself into? Victor took a deep breath and laid it all out. The company's dire financial state, the encounter with Daniel White, the shocking revelations from Karen about Anthony's alleged embezzlement and framing, the suspicious Phoenix Tower financials. He explained his desperate need for concrete evidence against Anthony. Al listened patiently, his expression growing increasingly grim as Victor spoke. He steepled his fingers, tapping them lightly against his chin. Anthony Moretti, Al mused, referencing Victor's protege by his full name, always struck me as ambitious, maybe a little too slick, but embezzlement on this scale, framing an employee, that takes ice water in the veins. He looked directly at Victor. This is heavy stuff, Vic. Are you sure Karen White isn't just bitter looking for revenge? I saw her face, Al, Victor insisted. I heard her voice. And Daniel, the kid wouldn't lie about something like this. It fits, Al. The numbers, the timing, the way Anthony benefited from her dismissal. I need you to dig. Financial records, offshore accounts, communications, connections. Anything that proves she's telling the truth and he's behind this. Al nodded slowly. All right, Vic, I'll take the case. But this won't be cheap and it won't be quick. Guys like Moretti, if they're dirty, they know how to cover their tracks. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. And one more thing. You need to be damn careful. If Anthony is behind this and he gets even a whiff that you're on to him, he could panic. Destroy evidence, disappear, or worse. Watch your back. I understand, Victor said, feeling a chill despite the stuffy office air. Just find me something, Al. Anything. I'll start with his financials, known associates, digital footprint. Al confirmed, already making notes on a legal pad. Feed me any internal info Karen uncovers. We'll work in tandem, but keep your distance from him for now. Act normal. Victor nodded, feeling a grim sense of purpose. He had Karen analyzing the inside, Al digging from the outside. The hunt was on. As he left Al's office and stepped back out into the still drizzling afternoon, Victor felt a surge of adrenaline. The game had changed. It wasn't just about saving his company anymore. It was about uncovering the truth and bringing a traitor to justice. Back within the polished, impersonal corridors of Vance Industries headquarters, the atmosphere felt charged with a new, dangerous tension. Victor moved through the motions of his day, trying to heed Al Thompson's warning act normal. But every interaction felt strained, every casual greeting potentially masking deceit. His primary task now was gathering the comprehensive files Karen needed, a task that required accessing secure servers and project archives, territory usually overseen by none other than Anthony Moretti. As Victor was heading towards the central records vault, carrying a discreet digital storage drive, a voice stopped him cold. "Victor, hey, heading out already?" Anthony Moretti stood leaning against the doorframe of his own office down the hall, immaculately dressed as always in a bespoke suit, a picture of smooth corporate confidence. But today, Victor saw him through new eyes. The easy smile seemed predatory, the friendly glint in his eyes calculating. "Anthony," Victor replied, keeping his voice level, forcing a neutral expression. "Just grabbing some project files for review." He needed to get past him, get the data to Karen. Anthony pushed himself off the doorframe, strolling casually towards Victor, blocking his path. "Working late tonight. Anything I can help with?" His tone was light, but his eyes scanned Victor, searching, probing. Victor felt a prickle of alarm. Was his suspicion showing? "No, I've got it handled," Victor said curtly, attempting to sidestep him. "Just some background on the Phoenix Tower deal. Trying to find efficiencies." Anthony raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Phoenix Tower? Thought we squeezed every dime out of that one already." He chuckled, a sound that now grated on Victor's nerves. "You seem stressed lately, Vic. More than usual. Everything okay?" He took another step closer, invading Victor's personal space. The feigned concern felt suffocating. Victor's instinct screamed danger. He remembered Karen's face, Daniel washing windows in the rain, Al's warning. The urge to grab Anthony by his expensive tie and demand the truth was almost overwhelming. He clenched his fists, forcing the anger down. "Everything's fine, Anthony," Victor snapped, his voice colder than he intended. "Just the usual pressure. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm on a deadline." He made to move past him again. Anthony didn't budge. Instead, he placed a hand lightly on Victor's arm, a gesture that might have once seemed friendly, but now felt like a restraint. "Come on, Vic. Talk to me. We're partners, aren't we? If there's trouble brewing, I should know. We're in this together." Partners? Together? The hypocrisy was staggering. Victor jerked his arm away, shaking off Anthony's touch as if it were contaminated. "Get your hand off me, Anthony," he hissed, the control finally slipping. "I don't have time for games. I have work to do." Anthony recoiled slightly, surprise and then a flicker of something else. Wariness, maybe even fear, flashing in his eyes before being quickly masked by offended dignity. The smooth facade had cracked, just for a second. All right, Anthony said, holding up his hands in mock surrender, though his eyes remained narrowed, watchful. "Just trying to help a friend. But if you want to shoulder the world alone, be my guest." He stepped aside, granting Victor passage, but watching him intently as he walked away. Victor didn't look back. He could feel Anthony's gaze burning into his back, suspicion now clearly ignited between them. The charade was over. Anthony knew something was up. The race against time had just become infinitely more dangerous. He quickened his pace towards the records vault, the storage drive feeling heavy in his pocket, now not just a tool for investigation, but a potential weapon in a rapidly escalating war. The small, tidy kitchen in Karen White's apartment felt worlds away from the sleek, predatory environment of Vance Industries. It was cozy, lived in, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and something baking apple cinnamon, Victor guessed. Papers and printouts were spread across the modest kitchen table, a stark contrast to the chaos engulfing Victor's life. He'd arrived minutes earlier, handing over the encrypted drive containing gigabytes of company data, financials, project files, internal emails, server access logs, everything Karen had requested. Now she sat opposite him, her focus absolute, scrolling through spreadsheets on her laptop, occasionally cross-referencing with the hard copies scattered around them. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the practiced speed he remembered. Victor watched, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. This was it. If proof existed, Karen would find it. She paused, pointing to a specific line item on a printout of the Phoenix Tower project budget. Look at this, Victor. Consulting fees, external architecture review. $500,000 paid out 3 months ago to a firm called Apex Design Solutions. Victor frowned. I don't recognize the name. Anthony handled most of the third-party contracts on that project. Karen nodded grimly. Exactly. Because Apex Design Solutions doesn't exist. I just ran a quick corporate registry search. It's a shell company. Registered address is a P.O. box in Delaware. She quickly clicked through more files on her laptop. And look here, the payment authorization? It has your digital signature appended. What? That's impossible, Victor exclaimed, leaning closer. I never authorized that payment. I never even saw that invoice. He forged it, Karen stated flatly, her eyes meeting his. Or, more likely, used stored credentials. Anthony had high-level system access, didn't he? Enough to initiate payments and bypass standard approvals, maybe even mask the transaction logs? The sheer audacity, the calculated betrayal, left Victor speechless. For years, Anthony had likely been siphoning funds, using ghost companies, forged authorizations, and covering his tracks brilliantly, until now. Karen continued her relentless digital excavation, her expression growing darker with each discovery. It's worse than I thought, Victor. This isn't just Phoenix Tower. He's been doing this for years, small amounts at first, then getting bolder. Fake vendor payments, inflated expense reports routed through offshore accounts. He used the confusion around my dismissal to accelerate things, buried transactions and restructuring costs. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open and Daniel walked in, home from school. He beamed when he saw Victor. Hey, Mr. Vance, you came. Did Mom find the bad stuff yet? Karen looked up, managing a small smile for her son, though her eyes remained troubled. Daniel, honey, Mr. Vance and I are working on something very important and complicated. Why don't you grab a snack and start your homework in your room? Oh, Mom, but this is like a real detective story, Daniel protested, looking hopefully at Victor. Victor smiled faintly at the boy's enthusiasm. Your mom's the real detective here, Daniel. She's doing amazing work. Listen to Mr. Vance, Karen said firmly but gently. We'll talk later. This is grown-up business right now. Daniel sighed dramatically, but obeyed, grabbing an apple from the counter and heading towards his room, muttering, They always keep the good stuff secret. As the door closed behind him, Karen turned back to Victor, her expression grave. He didn't just frame me to cover his tracks, Victor. He's systematically bled this company dry. He deliberately drove it towards bankruptcy, likely planning to pick up the pieces cheap or benefit somehow from the collapse. Victor felt a cold dread wash over him. It wasn't just theft. It was calculated destruction. Can you prove it? All of it? I'm building the trail, Karen said, her fingers flying across the keys again. The shell companies, the money transfers, the forged signatures, the deleted logs I might be able to recover from backups. It's complex, but it's here. It's all here. She finally looked up, her eyes meeting his, filled with a mixture of grim satisfaction and exhaustion. We've got him, Victor. Now we just need to figure out how to use it. Armed with the damning digital evidence Karen had meticulously compiled, a complex web of shell corporations, forged payment authorizations, laundered funds, and suspiciously deleted emails, Victor felt a surge of grim determination. He immediately arranged another meeting with Max Goldberg, this time bringing Karen along. They met in Max's plush conference room, the skyline view now seeming less like a symbol of impending doom and more like a battlefield awaiting reclamation. Karen, calm and professional, walked Max through her findings, projecting spreadsheets and transaction logs onto the large screen. She explained the methodology behind Anthony's scheme with chilling clarity, pointing out the forged digital signatures, the timing of the transfers, the deliberate obfuscation. Max listened intently, his lawyerly skepticism gradually morphing into impressed acknowledgement and then controlled outrage. He asked sharp, probing questions, testing the evidence, looking for weaknesses. Karen answered each one precisely, confidently citing file paths and transaction IDs. When she finished, Max leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. "Miss White," he said, looking at Karen with newfound respect, "your work is remarkable. Frankly, you've done most of the forensic accounting work already. This is comprehensive, devastating even." He turned to Victor. "This changes everything. We don't just have suspicion. We have a clear trail of fraud, embezzlement, and forgery, leading directly to Anthony Moretti." A wave of relief washed over Victor, quickly followed by cold fury. "So what's our next move, Max? How do we nail him?" "We have several options, proceeding simultaneously," Max explained, shifting into strategic mode. "First, we file a civil suit against Anthony immediately for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of assets. We'll seek damages, asset freezes. Second, we take this evidence straight to the district attorney's office. This isn't just a corporate dispute, it's criminal. Embezzlement on this scale means serious jail time." Karen nodded. "Freezing his assets is crucial. He's likely got escape funds stashed away." "Agreed," Max said. "We'll petition for an emergency injunction. We also need to consider Vance Industries. Filing suit against your top executive while the company is vulnerable could trigger panic among remaining creditors or spook potential rescue investors." Victor frowned. "So, suing him could still sink the company?" "It's a risk," Max admitted, "but doing nothing guarantees collapse. Exposing the fraud, showing decisive action to recover stolen funds, and demonstrating that the real problem wasn't mismanagement, but internal sabotage might actually help us renegotiate with creditors or attract a white knight investor. It proves the underlying business might still be viable once the cancer is removed." He paused, looking thoughtful. "One more thing bothers me. An operation this sophisticated, are we sure Anthony acted alone? Pulling this off required significant access, bypassing controls, potentially influencing audits." The question hung in the air. Victor thought back to Anthony's slick confidence, his network within the company, his ambition. "I don't know," Victor admitted honestly. "He's charismatic, manipulative. He could have groomed allies, people who owed him favors, or maybe people who were simply greedy." "We need to find out," Max stated. "While I handle the legal filings, you and Miss White," he nodded towards Karen, "need to discreetly probe internally. Talk to people who worked closely with Anthony, his assistant, junior finance staff, anyone in IT who might have noticed unusual server activity. See who seems nervous, who avoids eye contact, who might be willing to talk in exchange for leniency." Karen looked at Victor. "I know who to approach. People who were loyal to me before Anthony forced them to choose sides." "Be careful," Max warned. "Anthony knows you're suspicious now, Victor. He'll be on high alert. Anyone you talk to could run straight back to him." Victor nodded grimly. "We'll be careful. Let's move, Max. File the suits. Alert the DA. It's time to bring the hammer down." The meeting ended with a clear plan of attack. As they left Max's office, Victor felt a strange mix of vindication and trepidation. The legal gears were turning, but the internal investigation felt like walking through a minefield. Who else was involved? The question echoed in his mind as the elevator descended, carrying them back towards the company Anthony Moretti had so thoroughly poisoned. The next few days were a blur of controlled chaos. Max Goldberg filed the lawsuits and alerted the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, setting the legal machinery in motion. Karen, working remotely but with secured access Victor provided, continued to dig deeper into the digital morass, while Victor himself tried to maintain a facade of normalcy at the office, discreetly observing Anthony and attempting subtle probes with staff members Karen had identified as potentially knowledgeable or vulnerable. Anthony was a ghost, rarely seen, his door mostly closed. When Victor did encounter him, Anthony was coolly polite, almost aloof, but his eyes held a watchful, predatory gleam. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then came the call that blew everything wide open. Victor was driving back from a tense, unproductive meeting with bankers, his phone connected to the car's Bluetooth. "Vic, it's Al." The private investigator's voice was urgent. "You need to hear this. My surveillance team just tagged Moretti." Victor's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Where? What was he doing?" "Midtown Hotel Bar. The Oracle Club. Meeting someone. Guess who?" Al paused for dramatic effect. "Eugene Alexopoulos." Alexopoulos. The name hit Victor like a physical blow. Eugene "Gene" Alexopoulos was his fiercest competitor, head of Titan Corp, a ruthless rival Victor had battled for years. What in God's name was Anthony doing meeting with him? "Are you sure, Al?" "Positive. Got photos." They sat in a dark corner booth for an hour. And get this. As Moretti left, Alexopoulos slipped him a thick manila envelope. Looked heavy. "My guy thinks it was cash." Fury, cold and absolute, surged through Victor. It wasn't just embezzlement. It wasn't just framing Karen. Anthony had sold him out, sold the company's secrets, likely the plans for the Phoenix Tower, everything, to his biggest rival. For cash in an envelope. The betrayal was complete, absolute, unforgivable. "Where is Anthony now?" Victor asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Headed home, looks like. Took a cab towards his apartment downtown," Al reported. Victor didn't hesitate. He made a sharp, illegal U-turn, tires squealing, and gunned the Aston Martin towards Anthony's luxury Tribeca loft building, ignoring the blare of angry horns behind him. Adrenaline pounded in his veins, overriding caution, overriding everything but the searing need for confrontation. He parked haphazardly near the entrance and strode into the lobby, bypassing the doorman with a curt nod and taking the elevator straight up. He didn't knock. He pounded on Anthony's apartment door, his fist hitting the solid wood with bruising force. After a few moments, the door opened. Anthony stood there, looking startled, still wearing his expensive suit, but his tie loosened. Surprise quickly turned to wary calculation when he saw Victor's face. "Victor, what the hell?" "We need to talk," Victor interrupted, pushing past him into the apartment. The place was impeccably furnished, minimalist chic, a monument to ill-gotten gains. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on a low table. "Get out of my apartment, Victor!" Anthony snapped, regaining his composure, trying to project authority. "Whatever this is, it can wait." "No, it can't!" Victor wheeled around, his eyes blazing. "I know, Anthony, I know everything. The shell companies, the forged signatures. Framing Karen White." Anthony's face paled slightly, but he held his ground. "You're insane. You're under pressure, cracking up." "Am I?" Victor shot back, stalking closer. "Then maybe you can explain Apex Design Solutions? Or the $500,000 I supposedly authorized? Or maybe," he paused, letting the words hang, "you can explain why you were just cozying up with Gene Alexopoulos at the Oracle Club, taking cash payoffs from my biggest competitor?" The color drained completely from Anthony's face. The mask shattered. Pure panic flickered in his eyes. You were following me? Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Victor spat, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart. "All those years, pretending to be my friend, my right-hand man, while you bled my company dry and sold me out to the highest bidder? How much did Alexopoulos pay for my downfall, Anthony? Was it worth it?" Anthony tried to bluster, tried to deny it, but the evidence was clearly written on his face. Cornered, his fear turned to venom. "You deserved it, Vance. Always looking down on me, taking all the credit. Alexopoulos saw my talent. He appreciated." Victor didn't let him finish. Blinded by rage, he grabbed the front of Anthony's shirt, twisting the expensive fabric, shoving him back against the wall. "You piece of filth!" he roared, his face contorted with fury. "You betrayed me! You tried to ruin me!" Anthony struggled, fear mixed with defiance in his eyes. "You can't prove anything! You touch me, I don't need to touch you!" Victor hissed, his voice dangerously low, tightening his grip. "I'm going to destroy you, Anthony. Legally, financially, every possible way. You'll rot in jail for this." He held him there for another moment, letting the threat sink in, then shoved him away contemptuously. Anthony stumbled back, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with terror and hatred. Without another word, Victor turned and stormed out of the apartment, leaving Anthony alone amidst the ruins of his treachery. Back in his car, shaking with adrenaline and rage, Victor knew this was far from over. Anthony was cornered, desperate. But the satisfaction of the confrontation was overshadowed by the chilling confirmation of the ultimate betrayal. The war had just entered its most dangerous phase. The explosive confrontation with Anthony left Victor shaken, but strangely focused. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a conspiracy more devastating than he could have imagined. Yet Max Goldberg's question lingered. Did Anthony act alone? The meeting with Alexopoulos proved collaboration, but was there more? The answer arrived less than 24 hours later, delivered via a grim phone call from Max. "Victor, we have another development," Max said, his voice heavy. "Something Al Thompson's surveillance uncovered while tracking Alexopoulos after the hotel meeting. It's personal." Victor braced himself. "What is it, Max?" "Alexopoulos didn't go straight home. He went to meet someone else, at the St. Regis." Max paused. He met with Kira. Kira. The name struck Victor like ice water. Kira, his ex-wife, beautiful, ambitious, ruthless Kira, who had left him years ago, citing his obsession with work, taking a hefty settlement and vanishing from his life. Or so he thought. "Kira?" Victor repeated numbly. "My Kira?" "She's not just your Kira anymore, Victor," Max said gently but firmly. "According to Al's background check, she married Eugene Alexopoulos 6 months ago. Quietly, abroad." The revelation was staggering. Kira and his biggest rival married? "But what does she have to do with Anthony?" Victor stammered, his mind reeling. "We think she might be the missing link," Max explained. Al got audio from a parabolic mic outside the St. Regis bar. It's fragmented, but they discussed Anthony, the final push against Vance Industries, and Kira mentioned guiding Anthony, ensuring he played his part. It sounds like she wasn't just aware. She might have been pulling the strings, using Anthony as a pawn in her new husband's game to destroy you. Betrayal upon betrayal. Kira, the woman he had once loved, orchestrating his downfall alongside the man who stole his company secrets. It was almost too much to comprehend. The bitterness tasted like poison. "I want to see her, Max," Victor said, his voice hardening into steel. "Arrange it." The meeting took place the next day in a private suite at the very hotel where Kira had met Alexopoulos. She swept in, radiating expensive confidence, looking stunning and utterly unmoved. The surprise in her eyes at seeing Victor lasted only a fraction of a second before being replaced by a cool, calculating smile. "Victor, to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" she purred, sinking gracefully onto a velvet armchair. "Cut the act, Kira," Victor said, standing stiffly, Max a silent presence near the door. "We know. About you, Alexopoulos and Anthony. We know you helped orchestrate the plan to ruin Vance Industries." Kira tilted her head, her smile unwavering, though a flicker of annoyance crossed her features. "Jealous, Victor? Gene is 10 times the businessman you ever were. He saw an opportunity, and I merely facilitated. Anthony was pathetically easy to manipulate. A little encouragement, a promise of power. He was desperate to step out of your shadow." Her casual cruelty was breathtaking. "This was never just business for you, was it?" Victor asked quietly, searching her face for any sign of remorse, finding none. "This was revenge." Kira laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Maybe a little," she conceded, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "You always chose the company over me, remember? Consider this my severance package. Gene gets your empire, I get the satisfaction." "You won't get away with this," Victor stated flatly. Kira stood up, smoothing her designer dress. "Oh, I think we already have. Prove it, Victor. Prove anything." She leaned closer, her voice a venomous whisper. "It's over. You lose." As she turned to leave, Max stepped forward slightly, holding up his phone, the recording app clearly visible. "Actually, Kira," he said calmly, "I think you just gave us everything we need." Kira froze, her eyes wide with shock and fury, before storming out. 1 month later. The courtroom victory was swift and decisive. Faced with Karen's forensic evidence, Al Thompson's surveillance, and Kira's damning recorded confession, Anthony Moretti and Eugene Alexopoulos had little defense. Both received hefty prison sentences for fraud, conspiracy, and industrial espionage. Kira, leveraging her connections and playing the contrite, if unconvincing spouse, received a lighter sentence but a shattered reputation and a frozen fortune. Back at Vance Industries, slowly emerging from the ashes, Victor stood before his assembled employees. The atmosphere was cautiously optimistic. "We've been through hell," Victor announced, his voice clear and strong. "But we survived. Thanks to the hard work of many, and the extraordinary efforts of one person who uncovered the truth when no one else could." He turned, gesturing towards the side of the room. "Please welcome back Karen White, not just as our head accountant, but as my new chief operating officer." The room erupted in surprised, then thunderous applause. Karen stepped forward, blushing but smiling, her eyes meeting Victor's with gratitude and something more. Later that day, Victor found Karen in her new, spacious office, his old one adjacent to his current, smaller setup. He held a small, gift-wrapped box. "Karen," he said softly, "a small token of my immense gratitude for everything." She opened it cautiously. Inside lay a set of keys. "Victor, what?" "Look out the window," he urged. Parked in his executive spot below was a brand-new, top-of-the-line SUV, gleaming under the afternoon sun. Karen gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. You didn't—" "It's yours," Victor confirmed, smiling. "You earned it. You saved this company. You saved me." Overwhelmed, Karen stared at the keys, then at Victor, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know what to say." Spontaneously, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a tight, heartfelt hug. Victor held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling a warmth spread through him he hadn't felt in years. When she pulled back slightly, her eyes shining, looking up at him with a mixture of gratitude and shy uncertainty, he didn't hesitate. He leaned down and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing passion. It wasn't just the end of a corporate nightmare. It was the beginning of something entirely new, built not on scandal and betrayal, but on resilience, trust, and a second chance neither of them had ever expected. The Manhattan skyline outside the window suddenly looked full of promise again.